anniversary with my wife, and she didn't want to spend it in Ohio. So I'm not making it to the expo this year. I'm kind of bummed.
Where do you live?
I'm in Portland.
Okay, that's kind of a far trip too.
It's a really far trip.
Chase, are you going?
Yep, sure am. I'm Third and Short.
Yep.
You guys seen his stuff floating around? We're driving up there together because he lives about 30 minutes away. So I'm just gonna take an Uber to his house, and then we're gonna ride up there together. We split a hotel room, so
Nice.
I'm pretty stoked for it, man. It's good. I'm really excited for it. Actually, should be a fun time. But man, I cannot wait for Thursday night. I cannot wait for the Sime Fehoko, right? Did I say that right? His connection with Ben DiNucci on Thursday night, where we're going to watch some real all-pros play.
Yeah.
But I like preseason. I was kind of bummed when they knocked it down from 4 games to 3 games. I like watching preseason. I like watching some of these college studs get together. It's like a college all-star game, essentially, right?
Basically. We got to watch some Haskins to Freiermuth in the second quarter tomorrow night.
It might be the first quarter. I doubt that they play Big Ben in this game, right?
Yeah, there's no way.
Yeah,
I wouldn't think so.
Oh, I guess Mason Rudolph is technically the starting quarter or the second string guy right now. I think
over Haskins.
I think so. Yeah, I think that's what he said was he was taking the reps. Yeah, so we got to see how that works out. They said that he's still a long ways off, but he's shown a lot of upside, essentially, which is hit the story of his entire life so far. It was like he's not mentally developed enough to handle the starting role. I don't know. You guys ready to kick this show off?
Let's do it.
All right, here we go.
This is Fantasy Intervention. Now here to intervene with your fantasy life, Chase Vernon.
What's going on, guys? Welcome on into another episode of Fantasy Intervention. I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Phil. What's going on, Phil? How you doing, man?
Doing great, Chase. We got football tomorrow. I'm doing great. How could anyone not be doing great?
Yeah. Let's go. I am so excited, man. Hey, Adam. Adam, you want to do a starter sit show tomorrow?
For old time's sake?
Just for old time's sake.
Guys, dude, I was going to say, I think I premiered on that show when you got that new intro, because like we were doing a show for a couple weeks and you didn't have an intro, and then you premiered that one. I was like, oh, this is fresh. I love it.
Dude, I love our
intro
song. I love it, man. Like our start and sit show is amazing. It was so much fun to play around with. I mean, we sat there and we answered like 400 questions in the course of 60 minutes every single Sunday morning. We started out with like an injury report, and people would just start piling on these questions over and over again from Facebook. It was literally, I'm not kidding you, it was 400 comments that were on that post. And Adam's sitting there, and I'm like, Adam, we got to go faster, man. We got to get through these injuries because we got 400 questions to answer. So then we sat there, and we pounded out like 400 questions over there from Facebook. It was absolutely amazing. I want to give a shout out real quick to Brian in the chat and Husker. What's up, Husker? How you guys doing? But yeah, we're joined by Adam. Adam, what's going on, man? How's your day going?
Pretty good. Like you guys, I'm excited for some football tomorrow. I've had a long week, cracked open a cold beer, ready to talk some fantasy football, have a good time.
All right, let's go. Let's go tonight on the show. Real quick, Adam, do you want to give a plug and let everybody know where to find you?
Sure, absolutely. I recently transitioned to 4for4 for fantasy football content, so you can find a lot of my injury content at 4for4.com. or on Twitter. Twitter handle is @therealadam_H. For those that don't know or aren't familiar, I'm a practicing physical therapist. So I like to obviously take a lot of injury spin on some of my fantasy football content. So yeah, I've joined the guys over at 4for4. It's been a blast. Just started there probably about a month ago.
Dude, that's awesome, man. I didn't know about that. Congratulations. And
Appreciate
congratulations to 4for4 for getting you, man. I know you know your shit. And yeah, that's why we brought you on the show tonight, because guess what? There are injuries galore on the front right now. I mean, it's crazy. We just had somebody from the Giants, I believe, tear their Achilles as well.
Yeah, he's out for the year. I think a backup tight end.
Yeah, Tolilolo, I think is how you say his name. So
yeah, I was gonna let you say his name. I wasn't gonna say his name. I wasn't gonna butcher that.
I love saying his name, Tolilolo. Like, that's just fun, and I don't even know if I said it right, but that's the fun way to say it. So Tolilolo tore his Achilles, but we have other injuries that are a little more pressing. Obviously, we have the Carson Wentz news along with the Quentin Nelson news. And I think that's where we want to start. We don't want to spend too much time. I don't want to sit there and, beat a dead horse to a pulp. I just want to sit there and I want to discuss this real quick and more along the lines of like, why is there such a heavy gap when it comes to these injuries? Like, I could see a gap in the injuries when it comes to ACL tears. I can see, a timetable where it's like, oh, we don't know where he's going to be healthy a year from now or whether he's going to be healthy in 10 months from now, right? Because you have a certain amount of time and certain things that have to go right. Meanwhile, when you're sitting there and you're looking at a broken foot, it's like a broken bone. I would think that would be kind of set as to the timetable recovery, right? I mean, what am I missing here? Why is it 5 weeks to 12 weeks?
Yeah, it's a little bit of an odd gap. I think they threw that out there for Carson Wentz just to give him some time, and then Quentin Nelson had a very similar injury, so they're like, well, we gave that for Wentz, and it just kind of happened, so they kind of piled on there with the 5 to 12 weeks. I right now in my projections have Carson Wentz on the PUP. Which would mean he misses the first 6 games. But I think week 7 again at San Francisco, if not week 8 versus Tennessee, are very realistic times for him to return. So I think when you're looking at Carson Wentz and the Colts wide receivers, you just got to factor in already that the first 6 weeks are pretty much a wash for them. That would kind of explain that timeline, and it kind of puts it right in the middle there around like 8-9 weeks. So splitting the difference between the 5 to 12 weeks, but that's where I've got him projected right now based on his injury and what I've read.
So what has to go right in order for him to actually hit like the 5 weeks? Is there certain like workouts he can do, like rehab he can do? Like, why? I'm like, man, like this is a very large timetable. I mean, we're talking about almost 2 months of a difference in healing, but it's just a broken bone, right?
Yeah, but so someone put in the comments here, Ryan, he nailed it. Like, the bones in the foot are very, very small. There's minimal blood flow, and blood flow is how things are going to heal essentially. So with a lack of blood flow or minimal blood flow, it takes longer times to heal. So with the surgery that he's having, I'm assuming they're going to do some type of stabilization in there with either like a plate or more likely a nail. And because of that, he's going to be essentially in a boot, non-weight bearing for 4 to 6 weeks. So he's not going to be able to do anything. And that's where you can't speed up that recovery. Like, he's just got to be immobilized for that time period. And then the rehab part is where you get that gap of 5 to 12 weeks, because it just depends on how he bounces back through his progression once he starts, exercise and football activities once he can weight bear.
All right, so let's go ahead, Phil.
So if he does come back by week 5 or week 6, though, what's his pocket mobility going to look like, Adam? I mean, there's no way. Oh, Mason, he's an Atlanta fan, so don't have to worry about that guy. But like, he's not going to be the Carson Wentz scrambling 8 yards to the end zone and tearing his ACL. He can't be that mobile if he's coming back week 5 or 6 at the earliest, of course.
Yeah, and he was somebody that was actually pretty mobile back in 2019 when I was looking at mobile quarterbacks, because I like to look at the hit rate of some of those guys just to get an idea of who is more risk takers or who's more risk adverse. The thing I did find interesting when I was going back and just looking at QBR inside the pocket and outside the pocket, Josh Hersmeyer had data from 2019, and Carson Wentz QBR outside of the pocket in 2019 was 40 points higher than it was inside the pocket, which is like the most or the second most significant gap. Like he was significantly more accurate when he was getting out of the pocket and throwing on the run. And that's something that's interesting to me when you take in the context of this injury. Now with a foot injury, we can already assume that he's probably going to be less mobile. And with, if he's a more accurate quarterback and you're taking away some of that rushing floor for fantasy football production, it makes it definitely pretty hazy and kind of sketchy for fantasy football in 2021.
Yeah, dude, I can only imagine. But sitting there looking at it, this team is set up, right? Like this team is set up for Super Bowl, and they have a great offensive line. Well, questionable now because of Quentin Nelson, who's dealing with the same injury. They have arguably some good wide receivers if they can stay healthy. They have a very good defense. They have great running back. Can Eason step in and actually be worth drafting if you're drafting like a single quarterback league, right? Because redraft season's upon us, right? Dynasty season's over. It's now getting back to the people that normally watch football just while there's football on, not the crazy ass people who literally are excited for, the Hall of Fame game. So as we jump back in to redraft season, is Jacob Eason worth drafting in a single quarterback league? And I'm just going to go ahead and say no, although they are set up and all he has to do is drop back and throw it. I just don't trust him enough. But what's y'all's input? We'll start out with Phil.
So, we couldn't see him in the preseason last year. There was no preseason. We didn't see him take any snaps. I think his 1 year in Washington is something to hang his cap on, but I'm not touching him. It's not attractive. I'd rather throw my darts elsewhere in that QB 20 to 32 range.
What about you, Adam? How you feeling?
I was hoping Phil would have something more because I really don't have a lot to say about Eason either. And, it's not even like, I think some of his weapons are promising when we talk about Michael Pittman Jr. in the second year and maybe a healthy Paris Campbell, but it's not like the best wide receiver group in the league either that makes you like super confident that it's like, oh, if he just gets the ball out real quick, he's got a lot of playmakers. It's not a great situation.
Paris Campbell. But yeah, so and we have a prompt in here asking about like the Rivers, like, is he going to come back? Are we even going to waste our time talking about a quarterback that's going to play 2 games, if that, in the tail end of the season? I don't think so. So let's go ahead and hop over to the Cowboys. And once again, I don't want to sit there and beat a dead horse too much. But when we sit there and look at it, Dak Prescott obviously, had issues with his injury, prior to the shoulder injury appearing, right? So how much, Adam, do you think footwork actually played into him hurting his arm? Because guess what? You throw with your feet just as much as you throw with your arm. If you're not, using your feet the same way that you used them in the past, you could put a lot of strain onto that shoulder. So how much do you think that played a part? And, what can we expect moving forward? Because it seems like the Cowboys are now pulling back the reins big time and not going to allow him to throw.
Yeah, I think it's really difficult to quantify that in terms of like what the footwork had to do with the shoulder. I think from what I saw when he was coming back from the ankle surgery, I thought he looked pretty good. Maybe his mechanics were altered a little bit. The lat injury is concerning. I think more from the standpoint of it's just going to be a pain in the butt all season. Like it's one of those injuries where he'll be able to do everything that he needs to do, but raising the arm and kind of following through with his throws, I think is going to be a little bit of an irritant all season. It's something that could flare up later on in the season. So that's where I'm nervous is I think it's just something that's going to nag. And I was really high on Dak Prescott coming into the season off of the ankle surgery. I thought he looked good and I wasn't worried about him. And this injury now makes me a little bit concerned because I think the Cowboys are essentially going to shut him down for the majority of the preseason because there's no point in flaring it up before the season starts.
So is this something that would flare up towards the tail end of games? Is it something that could end up flaring up towards the tail end of the season? Is it something that could flare up both, or are they just going to shoot him full of drugs so he doesn't feel anything anyways?
I think they're essentially going to shoot him up with like Toradol and things like that. I think it's going to be one of those things where he's going to make a throw and it's going to be like a routine throw, or it's going to be like a deep pass and he's just going to catch it just right one time and he's going to feel it and it's going to flare up and then he's not going to practice that week. As long as and the lat muscle. Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Well, yeah. The lat muscle is so big. So it's depending on where the tear is, but as long as that tear doesn't like progress, he'll be fine. He'll be able to do the stuff. Like I said, it's just going to be one of those things where I wouldn't be surprised if you see him throw a pass and kind of grab the underside of his armpit or shoulder area because he caught it just right.
Could that pull him out of a game?
I think if the tear progresses, yeah. I'm assuming he's got like a grade 1 tear right now. If it got to a grade 2 tear, that's something that could pull him out for a series or a couple series or a half. And then depending on, if it happens in the first half, he might be able to come back in the second half. But if it happens in the third or fourth quarter, that it could be something that takes him out of a game.
Benvenucci time. Let's go. All right. So let's go ahead and let's answer this question from Ryan down below. What's the best wide receiver to target in Dallas? And coming off that news, hey, it might end up being CeeDee Lamb, who plays majority of his snaps out of the slot, right? Where it's close pitches. I mean, Adam, what's your feel on that? A close throw is going to be a little bit easier on him than throwing a 40-yard pass to Michael Gallup.
Yeah. I think people are worried about Amari Cooper because of the ankle thing. And I'm actually less worried about Amari Cooper. I think we've got PTSD this offseason because when we hear a wide receiver with an ankle injury, we think of like Michael Thomas and some of those other guys, AJ Green last year. And we think of guys just basically ruining their seasons. But I'll let Phil talk about CeeDee Lamb's ADP. It's getting up there.
It's up there.
It's getting a little
so
rich.
high.
So is Michael Gallup's, to be honest with you, at least like from the drafts that I've seen, like Michael Gallup's is getting a little bit higher than my comfort level. Like he's being drafted at the same range as like Cortland Sutton, who's the wide receiver 1 in Denver, as DJ Chark, who is arguably the wide receiver 1 in Jacksonville, right? So, sitting there and looking at it, like Gallup's the 3rd wide receiver on the Cowboys, who also has 2 good tight ends, who also has 2 good receiving backs, is getting up there in the same range as these other guys who are their number 1 wide receiver on the team. So yeah. I mean, as we look forward, like which one are you concerned the least about, Phil?
So for PPR, I'll go against the grain here. I actually am least concerned about CeeDee Lamb. If he's going to get his snaps in the slot and he's going to be kind of used as a safety blanket, I mean, we know Gallup's going to be doing his 30, 40-yard downfield targets. Those are going to be hopefully, 4 to 6 a game. I think CeeDee could easily see, based on Dallas's defense, which you talked about last night, Chase, he could be close to 8 to 10 targets a game. And I do worry about Cooper's availability. And internally, I think the Cowboys are also a little bit worried about his availability as well. And God forbid, he gets traded at the deadline. CeeDee Lamb and Gallup are going to hold down the fort for the rest of the year.
Well, let's talk about Michael Thomas, right? Because that's what was brought up by Adam. He was talking about how people are scared of the injuries, but I thought that the injury was very, very similar for Amari Cooper and for Michael Thomas. And Amari Cooper has been out for 7 or 8 months now. So sitting there and looking at it, like Adam, like what's the difference between the 2 injuries, if there is one, and why should we expect a sooner timetable for Michael Thomas?
So, I don't remember exactly what happened to him last year, but it's been different progressions this offseason. So Michael Thomas had a high ankle sprain, and it turns out it was a pretty significant high ankle sprain because he missed, I think, off the top of my head, 7 games with that sprain, which is a pretty extended timeline. So that tells us that the extent of his high ankle sprain was pretty severe. And when you have a high ankle sprain that's that severe, the likelihood of tearing other ligaments or having fractures in the ankle because that pressure and that load expands to different regions of the ankle and foot is fairly likely. And I think that's what happened with Michael Thomas is he had another ligament injury, and we don't really have clarity in terms of what happened to him during this offseason. If he had a procedure and then a cleanup, it sounds like he only had one, but it was delayed till June for some reason. And I don't know if he was trying to hold off on surgery. I don't know if some doctors were trying to hold off surgery, but it's clear that he waited too long. He had to get that procedure in June, which kicked his timeline out. While we're talking about Michael Thomas, he's a big fade for me this year in redraft. Like, I'm not drafting Michael Thomas at all because he's never going to get to a price point. I think it's very, very likely he doesn't play the first 8 games of the season. And if you're carrying somebody like that on your roster, that's unless you have a really deep bench or an IR slot where you can put Michael Thomas and just hold him there, he's going to be dead
multiple
weight.
IR slots.
Yeah. He's going to be dead weight for the first half of the season. You're not going to want to drop Michael Thomas because he's Michael Thomas. Like, you can't drop Michael Thomas if you drafted him. But it's going to limit you being able to pick up that hot waiver wire guy early on in the season. So I'm about Michael Thomas. I think he's a big fade, but his injury was different than Amari Cooper. And I don't want to talk too long about this injury, but he had like a cleanup procedure, some bone spurs removed. They've been conservative with him, but like I said, to the extent that they've done with Dak, like, I don't think he needs to play right now, because it's like, why risk a flare up when it's preseason? Like, they're just they're handling him with kid gloves right now, and that's fine. But it's a very different procedure, handled very differently.
All right.
Are the setbacks?
Okay.
Oh, go for it, Chase. I was going to say, does MT have a bigger chance of a setback versus Cooper? Who's in the riskier position? Like, could MT get shut down for the entire season if he's not back to where they think he is come week 10?
I mean, I think he could get shut down for the season, because if he doesn't come back after the first 8 to 10 games and the Saints aren't very good, then it's like, why bring Michael Thomas back? I don't know if setback's necessarily the right scenario, where I just think he's like at phase 1 in his recovery now, whereas Amari Cooper is on the back end of it. Like, Amari Cooper is basically done. Right. I think they both have chance of re-injury. Like, anytime you have a past injury, the chance of re-injury goes up a little bit. But I just think whether he gets re-injured or not, like, you're going to be able to play Amari Cooper week 1 and get fantasy production out of him and win games and potentially trade him, whereas Michael Thomas is essentially going to do nothing for you.
Well, I think they went through, Galladay went through a similar thing last season with the Lions, where, like, they weren't very good, so he didn't feel the pressure to come back. But I think he could have came back if they were making like a playoff run or something on those lines. So I think it's a very similar situation. Let's hop on to another really bad team from 2019 when we talk about the New York Giants. Let's go ahead and discuss Barkley, because what's happening? Like, I don't even know what's happening. Like, I don't know what's happening with Barkley.
The reports are crazy. Like, he's easily got to be one of the most like polarizing players this offseason. I actually did just write a column for him last week on 444's website, where I talked about, like, basically, here's Saquon Barkley's injury. Here's why the delay in his surgery. Here's what to expect. Here's the positives. Here's the negatives. So I'll kind of lay them out for you. And at the end of this article, because I always like to, when I have a medical spin on some of these things, I'm like, okay, but all people really care about is, can I draft this guy and how many points is he going to get me, right? Like, that's cool that you told me about like the ACL, but I just want to know about his points. So at the end of it, I give three projections based on previous players that have had running backs that have had ACL tears. And I say, like, depending on what type of fantasy gamer you are, like, here's 3 projections. If you're a little bit safer, this is where he probably finishes. If you're someone that's a little bit riskier and likes to roll the dice, swing for the fences, here's his projection. But I was on another podcast with Stefania Bell, and she was talking about how she knows the Giants director of rehab, and he's actually on the hamstring committee for the NFL. And hamstring injuries after an ACL injury are pretty common, especially if you overload that player and give him too much workload. You saw that happen with like Dalvin Cook in 2018 after his ACL tear. He came back, had a heavy workload, had a hamstring flare up, shut him down for like 6 weeks. So she was saying that
my mind is so blown. They have a hamstring committee.
Yeah. Talk about nerds.
Like, do they have like elbow committees and like Achilles committees?
There's the groin committee for
I am
hernia
so sorry
committee.
to interrupt you, but my mind is blown right now. I'm trying to process it, and I can't listen to anything else you're saying because I'm like, wait, they have
hamstring
like a
committee.
Oh, do they have a collarbone committee?
I don't know if the collarbone's cool enough to get its own committee. The hamstring's sexy, man. It's where it's at. Everyone wants to be on the hamstring committee. It's underneath there. It's underneath there. So yeah, so there's a little bit of an appeal there. Yeah, there's a hamstring committee in the NFL where they do research on a lot of this stuff, and this guy heads it, and he's the Giants rehab director. So he's thinking about that stuff. That they're definitely going to be cognizant with Saquon Barkley's workload, which is why we've heard these things about like, oh, we're going to ease him in, and we're not going to give a timetable and blah blah blah. And I think that's smart to a certain extent. My thing was when I was going and looking at like past running backs in terms of their production pre-ACL, post-ACL, there is a drop in their workload, the amount of carries, the yards per carry and things like that. Production drops off. But the targets, whether you were somebody that was getting a lot of targets or a little bit of targets, your targets stay relatively the same. And especially in PPR leagues for our running backs, we care more about those targets. Those targets are more valuable than a carry. Scott Barrett put out a study on like how a running back target is 2.7 times more productive than a carry for running backs. So I think if you're the Giants and you're being selective with Saquon Barkley's workload, like what does Saquon Barkley do really well? Like get him in space. So I think they could use him on third downs. I think they could design a lot of plays for him where he's involved in the passing game work and maybe not getting a lot of those carries early on in the game, but it helps with his running back production. So I've got Saquon Barkley right around, where did I put him? Right around RB4 on a points per game basis based on like an eased in workload starting off slow and kind of picking up towards the end of the season. I think I might be in the minority there, especially with some people in the medical field and fantasy football where they're kind of fading Saquon Barkley. The back half of my drafts, and Phil would probably know a lot about this in terms of like game theory. Like I have a hard time if I have like the 8th to 10th pick, letting Saquon Barkley slip past me there and letting somebody in the second round scoop up an insane value on Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, because Barkley has a redraft ADP of around 5 or so, which is also RB5. You're basically seeing CMC, Cook, Henry, Kamara go right before him. But for me, right, I don't think there's no real need to rush him back. The fact that they signed Alfred Morris, who's going to be a camp body for sure. That's interesting, but I'm going to move JT above him, Jonathan Taylor. I'm going to move Chubb above Barkley for me. If he's missing almost a quarter, I actually think he'll probably miss 2 to 3 games. So when you start thinking about that being a quarter of a fantasy season, do you start moving your Aaron Jones, Ecklers above him? So it's just how much do you want to risk it? And I just don't see that team needing to rush him back. There's no point, right?
For such a longer season, right? And the divisional games for the NFC East coming mostly at the tail end, it makes very, very interesting play for the Giants. I could see him getting like a 40 to 50% snap share in the majority of these games and approaching like committee. So that way they kind of work towards vamping it up, which we'll talk about here in a second. But I want to cover one more team in the NFC East. We got Devonta Smith over there with the Eagles. Should we expect for this to become a thing with him? Like, is this going to be a regular thing? I know there's a big battle about BMI and him being too small, and that's why he, hurt himself and all the other just, craziness. And I understand it's actually a thought in people's heads, and I don't think it's directly related, but at the same time, I mean, muscle mass matters, right? Or am I completely off on that? Adam?
Yeah, so not to get like too technical with studies, but that's something I also looked at this season, comparing like wide receiver BMI and injury rates and things like that. And I looked at a ton of wide receivers, I think over 160 wide receivers from 2016 on. And there was no correlation between like body mass, BMI, and injuries. If anything, of the data that I did found, the smaller BMI wide receivers had a less likely chance of suffering a skeletal injury, like a fracture, which isn't in this case with Devonta Smith. Devonta Smith has an MCL sprain. That's more of a soft tissue injury, but it's kind of interesting when you think about that. Like I think of guys when I think of that, like Laviska Shenault being a very physical player and like trying to run through somebody and like breaking his shoulder or having an AC joint sprain or something like that. So if anything, the smaller BMI guys didn't have that issue. It's not something that I would be worried about in terms of his career, him being a smaller guy. I am worried about it a little bit this year because that's we saw this with the Eagles last year. Like Jalen Reagor got hurt very early in the preseason last year. It limited his offseason work. So he got off to a really slow start because he wasn't integrated in that offense. I think it hurts Devonta Smith now because I think he's another player that might be essentially shut down all preseason, and he's going to be losing a lot of crucial snaps in that offense. And you could see him get off to a little bit of a slower start as well.
Makes Greg Ward interesting. But yeah, I mean, I think the bigger thing for Devonta Smith is the fact that he can actually catch, and Jalen Reagor couldn't. So I think that, Devonta Smith actually has a little bit better chance of being integrated in this offense, just because, if he can catch the ball, that's literally half the battle, and Jalen Reagor is not able to do that. So love that from you. Let's go ahead and when you first came on the show, right, we talked about how COVID was affecting certain players. Oh, wait, I got a question from Taylor. I don't know if Taylor's still in here. Sorry, I almost moved on without answering Taylor's question. Taylor, hopefully you're in here. He said, this is a different position, but CJ Uzomah tore his Achilles in week 2 last year and is back at practice for the Bengals. Is that a positive development for Cam Akers? Or since tight end and running back differs, does it not matter much?
I think it is a positive development in the sense that I think Achilles tear research and rehabilitation has come a long way in the last 3 to 5 years. And everyone's looking at Cam Akers as like he's dead now. But I think it's difficult to compare him to some of the past examples, A, because it's so long ago, B, because that sample is so small, and then C, that sample is so diminished in the sense of the quality of players like Donta Foreman, Arian Foster on like the last leg of his career, Mikel LaShore. Like these are guys that weren't in the same tier as Cam Akers. I think it will be interesting to watch guys like CJ Uzomah, OJ Howard, Marlon Mack this year and see how they've bounced back from those Achilles tears. I think it's very promising that they're all seem like to be on track to play week 1. They're all are with their former teams. Like no one cut bait. These are teams that had to watch their rehab all off season and they elected to bring them all back. That's a promising sign. They didn't cut bait. So I think I'm going to be watching those guys very closely. We don't have to make it about this, but I actually traded for Cam Akers in a dynasty league after that because I thought I could get him at a discount. It was a team that was very deep at wide receiver, so I traded, and I wasn't going to win this year, and I traded Michael Gallup and Trey Sermon for Cam Akers in a third.
That's good. That's really good.
Yeah,
I would
that's
take that
really
all day.
good. Yeah,
I think the
that's
same
a
thing
steal.
we saw. I think the same things we saw with like Achilles injuries are essentially now applying to the Achilles, right? Like ACLs, like, if you tore your ACL back 10 years ago, you were done. Adrian Peterson was like one of the first successful stories coming back. And, we saw what happened with him. I'm okay investing into players like Cam Akers, at a lower price. Like, do I want to pay, 2 first-round picks for him or first and another, first type player? No, but I think that Cam Akers is worth, throwing a dart at. And if you can send over somebody worth like a 6th round pick, 7th round pick, over 4 Cam Akers, I'm 100% for it. And even players slightly more, I could look into it based on your roster build. So even a rebuilding team, that's amazing. Like that you could do that. Plus you're sending away players who could help your team this year by sending away Trey Sermon, which essentially allows you to lose a lot easier and not add points to your roster. So I do like that. I think it actually increases the value of your own picks as well. So let's go ahead and let's talk about, the first time that I had you on the show, you talked about, ramping up, right? Because we talked about COVID and how players didn't have an opportunity. And I talked about the 2011 CBA agreement, 2011 lockout, and how players didn't have that time to ramp up. And COVID allowed even less time because those players were still off, practicing on their own. Meanwhile, during COVID, that wasn't as much of the case. So with that being said, I feel like we're seeing less injuries this year prior to last year, but that's just what it feels like. I feel like we see a lot of these precautionary injuries versus like real injuries, right? Like we're not seeing ACL tears nearly as much. We've seen now what Toilolo, tear his Achilles, but outside of that, there's been very few serious injuries. Adam, like what's it looking like to you so far this season? And how are you feeling about the injuries compared to last year? Is it because of the ramp up period? Am I just completely wrong and I'm just like, delusional and I'm not seeing the injuries that might actually be there?
I mean, I think it's tough because there's so much variance to injuries. Like myself and a lot of other people have like tried to look at some like predictive measures, and I'm sure a lot of NFL teams do too, because they're investing money into these people and their franchise and their future into these players, and kind of being able to see what's a precursor to an injury and what's not. I think it's hard to say now because we've had so many like hamstring injuries with like Hollywood Brown and some other players, but I think it would be interesting to see if there's a decrease. There was a lot of hamstring injuries last offseason. I'm trying to think. Like I think Denzel Mims had a pretty significant hamstring tear. T.Y. Hilton had a hamstring tear earlier in the season. Like a lot of marquee players and people that we were excited about had some hamstring injuries. Where I'm hoping with a full preseason and off season this year, some of those soft tissue injuries that we were seeing last year maybe decrease a little bit. It'll be interesting to go back and look at after this preseason's over.
And are we at the point in camp where coaches are required to disclose everything? Because there's probably a lot of players right now that have something lingering or might even be chronic that we don't know about because we don't get injury reports right now, and coaches want to keep their mouth shut. So I think the lack of news could hit us like a ton of bricks in the upcoming weeks.
I think Cliff Kingsbury is actually one of them. I'm going to go ahead and give you an intro to discuss this, Adam. Cliff Kingsbury is one of these guys because he's talking about AJ Green sustained some sort of minor injury, but he wasn't going to say what it was because he doesn't have to up until week 1, which could open up the door for, one of the best rookie wide receivers this upcoming season. Somebody that could actually dominate in targets, could probably see over, I don't know, he could break the record for receptions for a rookie this year. He could. It could happen.
Don't play with me.
Oh, no, he absolutely could. The one, the only Rondale Moore.
Let's go.
Is it warm in here? Is it hot in here?
Yeah.
Love this.
Let's go.
I mean, we sit there, we look at like Rondale Moore, right? And first off there's an immediate connection because they're like the same height between him and Kyler Murray. They make eye contact right off the bat. And, love at first sight exists. And love at first sight on the football field exists as well. So Kyler Murray and Rondale Moore could have this connection if AJ Green misses some time, but we don't really know because they don't have to tell us.
Yeah, I mean, on the injury front, and then I want to come back to Rondale Moore because I love talking about Rondale Moore. On the injury front, I mean, this has been a theme. Like if you've played fantasy football for a while, the coaches that like to discuss injuries and the ones that don't. I mean, the Patriots have been notorious about not divulging the extent of injuries and things like that. So it's team specific. I mean, they're right. There's going to be some teams that are going to hold those cards close to them and not divulge any injuries until week 1. And that'll be frustrating. But with the amount of coverage that these guys get and the beat reporters, I mean, how many reports did we get this week when somebody was just walking to the tent to like get a drink of water, but it's like, oh, he's going to the tent now. He's going to the tent. He's got a little bit of a limp. We got reports about like Tyreek Hill and like a bunch of other guys. So I think if something major happens, you'll know about it. You'll hear about it.
I do have a heart attack every sleeper notification I do get before I look at it. You just never know. When face unlock takes a second to unlock and there's like that moment, that third, like half a millisecond of anxiety that your star running back just went down. They do report on everything, it feels like.
I actually have to turn off my sleeper apps because I'm afraid that I'm doing something irrational, like drop a player that I don't want to drop if I have these updates coming to my phone constantly. So I'll check Twitter, but I have to mentally prepare myself before I go to Twitter to check on these injury updates. Now that I know you're with 4-4, Adam, I'll have to check you guys out instead. But yeah, it's an interesting off season when it comes to that. But I mean, one of the most interesting takes on this is whether Rondale Moore can break this reception record for the rookies, right?
I mean, if the Cardinals are smart, he's on the field 100% of snaps and he's in motion 100% of the time. Right now, I'm thinking in a vacuum, and I'm thinking of how he excelled at Purdue. But I mean, this guy in space, one-on-one a defender, it's not even close. Like if anyone that watched 1 second of the Ohio State game in 2018 knows that, right? So 100 targets, why not? There's 500. They're going to throw the ball 550 times. And he's already breaking ankles and breaking necks. There's a clip of him versus Charles Washington, a DB one-on-one. It was unfair. It was like Pee Wee football playing against Alabama. Like Rondale is already special in that camp, and people are taking notice.
Dude, I love it, man. I just love it.
Yeah. I think too I was excited when Arizona drafted him because I wanted him to go somewhere they would be creative, like Cliff Kingsbury has been and could do in the future. Like, could you imagine instead of like a jumbo package in the red zone, they have like a micro package where it's Rondale Moore, Kyler Murray, and Chase Edmonds, and you can't see him behind the offensive lineman, and they're running like jet sweeps and motions, and like you're losing them, and it's like, oh, there's Rondale, and he's in the back of the end zone because you couldn't see him running behind his 6'6" offensive lineman really close to the red zone there. I think that would be really cool. I think there's a lot of possibilities there.
All right, so let's go into some prop bets real quick because we are way behind. I figured that we start the prop bets at about 20 minutes in. I should have known better because I run over every time I try to do something. So we're going to try to do a few prop bets on here. I might have to skip a few of them, but we're going to start out with the quarterback position. I like prop bets. I like, sitting there and saying, okay, this is where a player is estimated to be based off of many smart individuals that actually do these, get paid a lot of money, more than any fantasy football analyst, essentially, outside of maybe Matthew Berry, actually gets paid to break down these numbers and to do a scientific notion to actually find the proper amount they're going to put up. Most of the time, they end up hitting it correctly. Sometimes they don't. It is what it is, though. I want to start out with the rookies, though, in the passing yards. So we have Zach Wilson at 3,750.5 yards. We have Trevor Lawrence at 4,050.5 yards. For the rookie season, as we look into it, it's not often that a rookie will actually throw for this amount. I mean, it's tough as a whole to get to that point. I think we've had a total of like 4 rookies or so in the past 4 years actually hit that. As we're sitting here doing it, Phil is actually typing in the chat. Phil, do you want to let them know what you're typing onto the spreadsheet?
So I guess with those totals for the over-under, Lawrence looking at 238 yards a game, and Wilson's looking at 220. 220 is like Lamar Jackson's rookie season, it feels like. That's like what he was throwing, maybe average, maybe peak. If I'm going to just start this off, I'm taking Wilson. One, we know he's starting week 1. We know the Jets are not the best team in that division, yet alone that conference, let alone the entire NFL. They're going to be throwing it a lot more. And overall, I don't think this is crazy. I actually like the Jets receiving core a little bit more than the Jaguars. Now, Adam, please don't hold that against me. I have some high upside guys on that side. But you bring in Corey Davis. Mims is going to be what Mims is, second team, first team. And I just think Wilson's going to air it out. So I'm going to take Wilson. I think he's going to go over 4,000. I think he's going to be averaging around 242 yards a game.
So just to, go with your point, like this system is actually perfect for, Zach Wilson, right? We talk about like the deep ball completion percentage. Wilson actually had the highest passer completion percentage for throws over 30 yards last season. Right. And he's always been good at throwing a deep ball. Meanwhile, you have the Jets, who is bringing over their offensive coordinator, Mike LaFleur, I believe, over from the 49ers. Over the past 2 seasons, the leader in deep ball completion percentage was Jimmy Garoppolo in 2019. And then last season, it was actually Nick Mullins, believe it or not, which is kind of crazy to me. They're very efficient because of the way they use their motions, because of their underneath passing and their play action, and they're able to get receivers open deep downfield. And then they end up, getting quarterbacks who can throw a deep ball. So it's kind of like the perfect marriage. If I had to pick one of these that I would rather place a bet on, and if we want to do it this way, we can. I think I'd rather place a bet on Lawrence. However, see, you thought I was going with Wilson. I'd rather place a bet on Lawrence because I think they're going to pass the ball a lot more often than what the Jets end up passing the ball. The whole reason why the 49ers offense works and why they can complete deep balls is because they limit their quarterback from throwing the ball often. So they can end up doing that there. Now, I don't think that they have a great running back corps, so I don't think that it's going to be very efficient overall over there for the running game. But I still think that the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to end up throwing the ball a whole ton. You have DJ Chark, who's a weapon. You have Laviska Shenault, who's a weapon. You have Marvin Jones, who's a crazy weapon, somebody that fits in this system perfectly. You have the best receiver in the NFL, and Colin Johnson. You have Travis Etienne, who is going to be a weapon in the pass. I mean, it's just surrounded by weapons, and they're going to have to pass because their defense is so bad. Not saying the Jets are very, that much better, but still, I would rather place the bet on an extra 300 yards and go with Trevor Lawrence. Adam, where do you sit?
I mean, when Phil talked about Zach Wilson, I was like, yeah, there's no freaking way I'm going to pick Zach Wilson. But I was like looking at last year, and like that's like Teddy Bridgewater, Baker Mayfield numbers, who, as we play fantasy football, we know those guys don't throw for a lot of yards, and they don't have a very deep average depth of target or average yards per pass attempt throwing downfield. And with an extra game, I mean, the Jets I don't think are going to be very good, and they're going to have to throw a lot. Like, I don't hate that bet. It feels gross betting on Zach Wilson, but I don't hate that. I think that's a decent number.
Lawrence is only 18 yards per game more.
I know he's got to be in like, that's creeping up to like Aaron Rodgers, Matt Stafford type of numbers, which I think are doable, but that's ambitious for a rookie. I feel like that's a lot.
All right, well, let's go to the old vets, right? Because the old vets are way higher when it comes to over-unders. So we have Stafford sitting at 4,550 yards. We have Matt Ryan at 4,400.5 yards. We have Brady at 4,650.5 yards. We have Aaron Rodgers at 4,500.5 yards. So when it comes to prop bets, like, which one do you feel the most comfortable that they are definitely going to beat their over-under? I'll go one more time. Stafford, 4,550. Ryan, 4,400. Brady, 4,650. And then Rodgers, 4,500 throwing yards. Which one do you feel the most comfortable is definitely going to end up over?
It's so hard to bet against this Rodgers revenge tour. I mean, I have such a hard time predicting what this guy's going to do. Because, hey, those 5 touchdown games where he just looks like he's a kid on the playground? That's going to happen a lot this season. I think so. I have a hard time with that one at 4,500, which is around 265 a game. I'm going to go with Stafford, and I have Stafford as top 5 QB this year. I absolutely love his alignment with McVay, the weapons he has. Akers going out gives him a little boost. So Stafford averaging 267 a game. Yeah, I'm pounding the over that entire time.
I will just say that the only one that beat any one of these totals, any one of these, was Matt Ryan last season. Obviously, Stafford, got somewhat close. Although, I mean, he was hurt the entire time, but he played, 15 games, 16 games? So the only one that beat any one of these totals was Matt Ryan last season. So, Adam, where do you stand?
I'm torn between Stafford and Rodgers, to be honest. Without Julio, I know Kyle Pitts is there and Calvin Ridley's still there. Without Julio, though, I'm a little bit worried about Matt Ryan's number. 4,600 for Tom Brady. I know he keeps proving us wrong, but that's a tough bet to swallow with Tom Brady. My issue with Aaron Rodgers at 4,500 is he's always so efficient that there's games where he has 5 touchdowns, but he throws for like 188 yards. You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't those big fantasy games aren't always like a lot of passing yards for him. But I kind of like getting behind the notion of the revenge tour, and I don't think that Green Bay defense is going to be that good. I know people like Green Bay's defense, even like heading into the playoffs last year, but I don't really like what how they're set up right now, and I think that could be a potential pitfall. The whole last dance with Devontae Adams, I think they just air it out, give up the middle finger to everybody, and go crazy. So I like Aaron Rodgers at 45.
Yeah, that revenge tour is also good for AJ Dillon getting fourth quarter garbage time when the Packers are up 38-14.
There you go.
So I'm sitting there and I'm looking at the fact that, like I said, the only one that hit this was Matt Ryan. So as we look at it, there's only one team that has a terrible defense, right? That won't need to throw, or that will need to throw, and also does not have a running back that's a top tier running back, and that's going to be Matt, who's sitting, at least 100 points less or 100 yards less than the next closest guy. I mean, Rodgers, he has Aaron Jones, and I think that's probably my second next bet. But like, he has Aaron Jones who can run the ball, and he has AJ Dillon who could break out and have some big time games where, guess what, he'll only need to throw for 188 yards and get 5 touchdowns. So when we sit there and we look at it, like, Brady's not going to need to throw, Stafford's not going to need to throw because their defenses are going to be dominant most of the time. I would lean towards Matt Ryan with this 4,400 yard over under, and I think that he has the best chance of beating it even without Julio Jones, which I think is gross and I hate saying, but he's gonna be passing a lot. He could pass more times this year than he passed in his entire career, which I think he's close to setting record. But let's move on to rushing yards. If you guys have nothing else to add, y'all good? All right, Let's move on to rushing yards. I'm gonna go with second year backs. I pulled out Jonathan Taylor just because we could talk about Jonathan Taylor, the injuries forever. We already talked about him. So we're going to go with DeAndre Swift at 875.5 rushing yards. We have J.K. Dobbins at 1,025.5 rushing yards. We have CEH at 875.5, so he's equal to Swift. We have Robinson, who's at 650.5. We have Gibson, who's at 1,000.5 rushing yards. Which one do you guys lean towards being the easiest? We'll start out with Adam this time.
This is tough. I'm probably gonna go with CEH at 875.
Woo.
And the reason is that I can't get behind James Robinson. I'm a big Travis Etienne guy, so I'm just going to ignore James Robinson right off the get. 1,000 yards rushing sounds really high for Gibson. I know what was impressive about Gibson last year is, like, we knew he was a great receiver and receiving back, but he like, when he broke out, it was on the ground running. But that feels a lot for him. I think he could be more involved in the passing game, which would hurt his rushing totals. 1,000 yards for J.K. Dobbins seems like the obvious choice, the way Baltimore runs the ball, but they like Gus Edwards, and Lamar Jackson's potentially going to eat into that some too. I'm not buying Swift as a runner in that Lions offense. I think he'd be a great pass catcher. So from process of elimination there, I get it. CEH hoping for positive game scripts, getting garbage time and racking up some yards at 875. That seems doable.
I think Husker's been watching this entire time, but he's like really, really far behind because he puts up on here, I'll take the over on Wilson, the under on Thielen. Meanwhile, he brought up Devonta Smith earlier, but he brought it up like 20 minutes later. So, Husker, I think you're a little bit further behind on this. I don't really know what happened. But yeah, I agree with you, like, on kind of like the obvious one with Dobbins. But I'm going to let Phil take this because he found something that I saw like right away. So go ahead and take this, Phil. Which one do you think?
I think Dobbins is 200 yards too high. There's too many rushing possibilities in that offense. I like Robinson. It immediately jumped off the page to me. 38 yards a game is all he needs to hit 650. And while I do love Etienne, and I think obviously they spent the first round capital, and he's not going to just be a slot receiver. They're going to have an interesting mix in the backfield. 38 yards is very doable in that offense, especially if he's getting goal line. They could be up in the second half for a certain part of their schedule in the first half of the season, given their opponents. And I mean, we still just can't forget about this guy. Like, you can't argue with that rookie year. There has to be some respect put on his name. The coaching staff knows that, regardless of that first round selection. So 38, I'm pounding the over on that all day. I'd actually put the money on that right now. It feels right to me.
Caesars Sportbooks is where you can find these if you all wanted to put some money down. Don't leave yet. Just write them down, and then you guys can put the money on after we finish the show. But no, I think that Robinson is 100% like a lock to actually be the over. I think that he sees at least 60 yards per game. So seeing an extra 20, that increased percentage is through the roof. But I want to bring up DeAndre Swift real quick, because DeAndre Swift, he does face one of the harder rushing schedules in the NFL this upcoming year. I think it's like in the bottom like 5 or so. However, the Detroit Lions, they ended up having the 10th best run blocking offensive line, I believe, and the 13th best pass blocking offensive line this past year. And then they go and they add the best tackle that we could see in this entire generation in Penei Sewell. He might not be, but he definitely has an opportunity to be. So you take one of the best run blocking offensive lines, a top 10, and then you add in Penei Sewell. I mean, you're talking about a dominant line that, guess what? They're not going to be able to pass because they don't have any receivers. Now, he might end up getting used in the passing game a little bit more often, like out of the slot, just like they did with Austin Eckler back when Anthony Lynn was with the Chargers. So yeah, that concerns me a little bit that they use him as a slot receiver on third down, so maybe he doesn't get as much of an opportunity. But Swift is special, and this offensive line is special. And when you have two special people, and you know, they meet each other, and they fall in love with each other, you know, something magical type like seems to happen, right? And I feel like Dan Campbell is like the perfect matchmaker out of everybody. I mean, the intensity, the passion that he brings.
Did you see his coffee order this morning?
Oh, I did.
Did you see his? Yeah, it's absurd.
It rivals my Monster Energy drink order that I make every morning at 7-Eleven back when I was like 20 years old. So I think that this passion could lead to multiple touchdowns. Sorry, I was about to say babies, touchdowns, you know, from this connection that these two could have because of, you know, Dan Campbell's energy and his matchmaking ability. Obviously, in all reality, this offensive line has been built for years and years and years to come. And Detroit's never had an offensive line. I think this is why we could actually see the dominant surge. However, with that being said, I would take Robinson over Swift because I just think Robinson's too sweet to pass up. And I think that if you have $50 in your account, you should probably go put it on Robinson hitting his over on 650.5 yards. All right, let's pass over to running back ones. A lot of these guys are going to, you know, have comeback type seasons. We have Barkley at 1,200 yards. We have CMC at 1,175 yards. We have Chubb at 1,325 yards, and we have Zeke at 1,100. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, I don't feel great about any of these. How are y'all feeling?
And that Chubb number is high. That's 78 a game. I know they paid him, but those third downs don't always go his way. I don't love any of these. The Zeke one jumps off the page, a little slimmer this year. The Dak injury, they might get back to basics. He's looking really good. I mean, physically as well right now. And he's come out and said he's in a much better place than he was, let's call it week 4 last year. So the Zeke one feels the best to me, but I also feel like I'm sleeping on CMC. I feel like everyone out here just has forgotten who this guy is. And the moment he steps back on the field week 1, we're like, oh, that's the reason he's 101 in every format most of the time. So the CMC one, he could put up 1575 and none of us should be surprised.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about Nick Chubb's numbers, right? His career average, including his rookie season, right? It was 80.8 yards per game. So he's done it since his rookie season. Last year he obviously missed 4 games. And I know it's tough to see it, but I think that we could see it come back. But I mean, like you said, I don't love any of these. Adam, like, how you feeling, bro?
I think the Zeke one's interesting. I'm going to take CMC. I mean, I think Phil nailed it. Like, people are forgetting about him. That seems like these are all big numbers, but that feels like easy money with CMC. I talked about like the decrease in rushing production and rushing efficiency coming after an ACL. So 1,200 for Zeke. I mean, that's ambitious. I don't have him at 1,200 yards in any of my projections on the ground. Chubb at 1,300. Yeah, that's a big number. That's a lot of yards. Zeke and CMC are where I'm leading, but I'm going to go with CMC just because the guy's a freak, and I think we have forgotten about him.
On the inverse, is Vegas just getting pounded on the under with Barkley? Like, I'm surprised they haven't pulled that line yet. That's very surprising.
Put a bet down. I didn't even think about that. That's a good point. I mean, at the same time, CMC is also reliant on big plays. So, like, he could have 10, different 75-yard rushes, essentially. He's not going to have that many, but he could have a good amount of breakaway runs. So I think that number is very, it's very, like, it could fluctuate from different perspectives depending on what you think is going to happen with Barkley. But I mean, I bet you he's not that much higher up. I don't have the numbers in front of me right now, but I would like to see the percentages of the bets. Let's go ahead and move on to Carolina, let's go ahead and move on to receivers, and I'm just going to bring Carolina because DJ Moore is at 1175.5. Meanwhile, Robbie Anderson is at 950 yards. What do you guys make of this? And I mean, like Robbie Anderson dominated the receptions last year, right?
I think it kind of boils down to, do you believe Sam Darnold is going to be the guy we thought he is? So I actually don't I think both of these guys are not, I don't love them at their current ADPs. I think there's too much risk baked into the quarterback situation. And I don't think either of them are QB proof in terms of just, you can plug and play anyone, any backup, and they're going to get to that 75 plus yards per game. So I would take under for both of these. I'm lower on the Carolina offense than most, just given that I've never been a Sam Darnold fan, and I don't think this is the year he turns it around. So I'm taking under for both of those. If something's gonna hit, it's just DJ Moore being DJ Moore, and just he's a great wide receiver, and he's always been a great fit in that offense.
I mean, sitting there looking at it, DJ Moore has barely hit this number twice, 1193 and 1175. Meanwhile, Robbie Anderson crushed this number his 950 yards from last season. I feel like 950 is pretty attainable for Robbie Anderson. Adam, where are you leaning?
I didn't like either, and then I looked and they were both at or right over these numbers last year with one less game, and it was with Teddy Bridgewater, the majority, who is not that much different than Sam Darnold. So I was originally like, ew, I don't want any of these, but I don't mind the Robbie Anderson one just because it's, under 1,000 yards with Sam Darnold, who he's played with in the past. I feel like that could be the most obtainable one.
All right, let's go with, oh man, we're running late. We're not going to have time to get to all these. Let's go ahead. Let's do a couple more, and then we're going to go ahead and call this show. Let's go ahead and get into some fun ones. So just because I want to have a little bit of fun with this, I want to say, who does Lawrence throw his first touchdown pass to?
Better not be Tebow.
It's tied right now, Adam. It's tied right now between Chenault and Chark for the Vegas odds. I think they're both plus 200. Meanwhile, Chark is at who was it? Marvin Jones and ETN are plus 500. Any others are like plus 12.
I'm going to say give me like ETN. Give me ETN. I could see them getting in the red zone and like dialing up something from college just to like make it easy for Trevor Lawrence, get the fans excited. I would say ETN.
Adam took the words out of my mouth. I think they're going to pull something on 3rd and 4 at the 3-yard line. A little read option goes to ETN for the flip. I think that's what they're going to do. It's going to be Twitter's going to go nuts when that happens. We know it.
That's pretty much what I was assuming. I actually had ETN as well, but now I'm going to go Colin Johnson just to play the field.
They're tight end 1, right?
They're tight end 1. The guy that's going to lead the team in touchdown receptions anyways. It's going to be Colin Johnson, 100%. That is going to dominate this upcoming year at the receiver position / tight end position for the Jacksonville Jaguars. All right. Do you guys want to dive in some defense or just go straight over to offense?
Let's do one defense.
All right, let's go with who leads the NFL in sacks this upcoming year. This past season, it was TJ Watt, I believe. He might have tied with somebody else. I'm going to start this one out to give you guys a little bit of time to think about it. I'm going to go with Myles Garrett. They added Malik Jackson from Philly. They added Jadeveon Clowney from the Titans, right? Like Jadeveon Clowney, he's somebody that covers more of the run, but he still can apply some sort of pressure to allow them to double team, get every single play. They ended up adding a middle linebacker who's going to play the weak side right now. He's going to end up blitzing off the edge, so they're going to have to worry about him. Myles Garrett, every time he gets a one-on-one, he's going to get a sack. I think that he can end pressure on Michael Strahan's single sack season record. He breaks it, but I think it's around a 19 or so. I think it's a lock for this year. I don't really see anybody else close. We've got TJ Watt. I think that with the loss of Bud Dupree, it kind of takes away from that opportunity, or from me, because he's going to double team often. Is there anybody else that y'all could see? I mean, Chase Young's a possibility, but Chase Young has so many guys on this offense that can get sacks, get snaked away from him a few times. Is there anybody that you guys like to lead the NFL in sacks outside of Myles Garrett?
I think it's Chase or Myles Garrett, but I do have a sleeper, and this is going to be a little of a long shot, but Chris Jones is moving to the edge in Kansas City, right? We know Frank Clark is having some legal battles outside of off the field, I should say. Chris Jones has lost some weight. They're moving him to the edge. And if he repeats his 2018 15.5, like, I think he will be up there. And I think we shouldn't be sleeping on him, especially given the fact that they want to start playing him less in the interior, more on the edge.
People don't discount how important it is to have a good offense in order for defensive ends to get sacks. Because guess what? Like, it's something like 40% of the sacks come in the fourth quarter, because teams drop back a lot more often. You know what they're going to do, so they put pressure on the edge and they rush as many players as they can. That's where most sacks actually come from, is in the fourth quarter. So sitting there and looking at it, I can understand that completely. Adam, where are you feeling about this? Is there a guy that you think in there? I'm going to go with one of ours.
I was thinking Chase Young. I like the Washington schedule. They play in the NFC East, notorious bad defenses, good offenses, high scoring games, going to have to pass a lot. And then they play the NFC South, Atlanta, New Orleans, Carolina, other teams with bad defenses and offenses that can put up some points. So I think you could see a lot of high scoring games where in the fourth quarter, people are going to have a pass rush.
All right. You guys want to cover one more defense or move on to offense? One more?
I'm always in for one more defense.
All right, let's do it. All right, so the over-under on the interception leader having 8.5 interceptions this upcoming season. And I think this is tough. I really do. I think it's very tough, because we sit there and we looked at two players that actually broke 8.5 last year. There are two players that broke 8.5 interceptions last year, but we haven't seen a single player over 8.5 since 2012, which is absolutely absurd. And we're talking about 8-9 years of not having a player get over that outside of last year. So 8 years. If we sit there and we look at certain players, we got like J.C. Jackson, right? Who New England's defense is going to be way better because half their defense was on COVID last year. Stephon Gilmore is another one. Or the other one that I have is Kendall Fuller from Washington, right? Because if you sit there, you apply pressure constantly, they throw the ball up, you're going to have Kendall Fuller getting a lot of opportunities for interceptions. He only had 4 last year, but they added in William Jackson, who's known to be more of a shutdown type corner. If William Jackson gets shut down that side, forcing targets to the slot as a release valve, because the defense is currently constantly applying pressure on the outside, Kendall Fuller could end up having 8-10 receptions this upcoming season. This is tough. Phil, like I'm going to go with all that being said, I think I'm going to go with under, but I can see 3 different players making it this year. I don't think Xavier Howard's going to have 10 interceptions again. How you? I'm
going to lean with history on this one. It's just the fact that it's happened twice since 2012. I know that we're obviously, like, every year we become more and more of a passing league, but there's too much variance, especially given all the different defensive formations that folks are rolling out now. You're not getting that, the common 5 out of the 11 folks are playing over 100% of snaps. I think there's just too many rotations, too many new formations, and I'm not going to bet against history. Too much variance for me. So I'll go under. And I if I was to go over, I couldn't even tell you the player. It just too much variance for me.
All right. Well, Adam can only hear dicks. That's what he said. I think he can only hear dicks, so he just left for a second. I think he's going to try and rejoin. So we're going to go ahead and skip on this one. But let's go ahead. We'll hop on to – we got 2 more.
Perfect.
Which running back will will the leading running back have more or less than 16.5 rushing touchdowns?
Wow. Okay. Who had the most last year? Or what was the max
Derrick
last year.
Henry. Derrick Henry, I think, had 17 last year. And this is this is still tough. Like, this is very similar to the cornerback situation. That's where we're not going to see a ton of interceptions, but it's still more often than than the cornerbacks from last year. Sorry, I'm paying attention to Adam down here. Sitting there and looking at it. Adam, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, let's go.
Yes, there we go.
All right, so we've moved on to, will the leading running back have more or less than 16.5 rushing touchdowns? So Derrick Henry did it last year. It happens like every other year. I think the last one actually happened was like Todd Gurley or somebody like that. So sitting there and looking at it, it does happen. But it's like Derrick Henry this year isn't going to be the guy that's able to do it. They have a terrible defense over there for the Titans this upcoming year. They lost a lot of starting pieces with Adoree Jackson, amongst others. I think he's going to see an increased workload in the passing game, so I don't think Derrick Henry is able to beat it. If there is one running back that can beat it, I think that it's Nick Chubb. Between him and Kareem Hunt last year, they had 16 total rushing touchdowns. Kareem Hunt vultured a good amount of them as they got close to the red zone. I still don't like that, so I think I'm going to take the under on 16.5 rushing touchdowns. But is there anybody that you guys could see could actually crush this number of 16.5?
The two folks that came to mind were CMC and Aaron Jones. And I think they're taking the back seat in both of their offense. I mean, I think CMC is going to be slowly eased back in. We're going to see who he is, but 16.5 is a lot. And I think Aaron Jones is just not going to have the same production touchdown-wise that he did the last year or even two, given the Rodgers revenge tour we touched on earlier. I don't see a single running back doing it. Chubb would be up there in my top three next to CMC and Aaron Jones. But, I mean, 16.5 rushing, tough. Combined, five or so running backs should hit that with receiving added in there. I don't see it happening. I'm going under.
Yeah, CMC was going to be my only other pick, because you want a team that can move the ball but doesn't have a really good red zone threat. Like, the thing that worries me about Aaron Jones is you got obviously Devontae Adams and Robert Tonyan. Nick Chubb, you could have Kareem Hunt vulture a couple there. Austin Hooper had a pretty bad year last year, but he's somebody that could certainly have a positive regression in the touchdown department. I hope it's CMC. I got him on some dynasty rosters. It would be nice to have him come back on a tear after he hurt me last year. That would be my only pick, would be CMC.
I'm going to throw one more name out there, then we'll go to the next question. Jonnu Smith. Just marinate. I'll let you guys think about it for a little bit. Let's go ahead and go to the next question. Will there be more or less than 5.5 games where a player had 200 plus receiving yards? And for me, it's a smash under.
Under.
As his offenses has progressed, right? It's been spread out. So we haven't seen more than 4 games, not even 5.5, more than 4 games with over 200 plus receiving yards since 2014. It's because these offenses are spreading things out. They're getting their wide receiver 2s, their wide receiver 3s involved in the offenses. We just don't see that dominant receiver. When we look at Devontae Adams, we look at Tyreek Hill, and we look at Stephon Diggs, they're probably the only receivers that actually have a legitimate chance outside of a freak thing that happened with Marvin Jones. And then who was the Pittsburgh wide receiver that did it once? Marcus Wheaton back in 2015. We don't see these freak things happen very often. 200 receiving yards is a lot of receiving yards. It's not a freak accident type thing. I honestly am going to smash that under, and it's actually paying out pretty big right now because a lot of people are taking the over.
Would you change your mind if MT was playing?
Yo. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I would. With Jameis Winston at quarterback, I think that I could see the over, because I think Michael Thomas could easily see a game, maybe 2, of over 200 yards. But I mean, minimum of 1 up against the Atlanta Falcons. But they play the Atlanta Falcons twice a year, so it's most likely going to be 2. Plus, they have the Dallas Cowboys. They have the Philadelphia Eagles on the schedule. So, yeah, I think Michael Thomas could easily crush that if he was playing, but he's not playing. So, it's actually kind of interesting. Maybe we do see one of these freak games out of Traquan Smith. Traquan Smith could be the guy that actually gives you an over on the 200-yard game.
the odds on that have to be plus 580, if not more. I mean, actually,
plus
it actually has to be
5,000.
plus 1,500. Yeah.
Minimum. Plus probably 50,800 to actually place a bet on that. That's actually worth, getting some money on. But I don't know. Adam,
how about 500 passing games? After Adam answers this, I'm curious if we think any QB or how many 500 plus yards from QBs we're going to see this year.
I'll take under on the receiving pretty easily, like you guys said. That's a lot.
I would have to break down numbers. I broke down a lot of the numbers earlier before the show. So to break it down on the show for a quarterback would have to be, really, really like Rain Man-esque of me. So I'm going to sit there. I'm going to assume that we had probably like 6 to 8 last year. If I had to take a wild guess, I'm not sure. It's probably actually slightly under that. Now I'm thinking about it. I think Joe Burrow hit like 4 something a bunch of times. I thought he hit 5, but now I'm thinking about it. I think he only hit it once. I'm going to go ahead and say like there's going to be 5 this year. I think that's where I'd probably say over under 5.5. Same amount as the wide receivers, 200-yard receivers, 5.5.
I think that's probably right in the sweet spot. Exactly like the wide receivers, 5.5. Yeah.
Are you trying to look it up real quick, Adam?
No, I was looking at something else. I might take the 500. So many, man, that's tough. I'd probably still take the under on 500 for QBs. It just feels like a lot.
It is a lot. It's a whole ton. I mean,
it's a lot.
Trying to get it up as we're speaking right now, but greater than 500. Let's see, year. Nope, mess that up. Anyways, I can't do all this math that quick. All right, let's go ahead and let's get out of here, guys. We've had a long show. It's been going for almost an hour and 20 minutes. Adam, where can we find you, man?
First off, I want to say thanks for having me, guys. I had a blast. You can find me on Twitter at @therealadam_H. I'll be talking about fantasy football injuries all season long, watching games, giving live game updates, and helping people with their waiver wire at 4for4.com. That's where you can find my fantasy football content. I have some injury profiles that are coming out right up until the start of the season. Talked about Dak Prescott, talked about Saquon Barkley. I got an Odell Beckham Jr. one coming out. Along with an article that talks about typical injuries in the NFL for your fantasy rosters, what you can expect in terms of games missed and production post-injury. So that'd be something to kind of bookmark for the whole season. If you have somebody that suffers a hamstring strain, or if you have a running back that suffers a high ankle sprain, what you can expect going forward.
Okay, sorry, I was looking up the passing yards thing. My bad. All right, no, I couldn't find it. Phil, where can we find you, man?
Awesome. You guys can find me at Dynasty Society _ on Twitter. Got some really fun stuff in the works. Pieces on Rondale, Bateman, Trey Sermon, Nico Collins, and Freiermuth. Actually, haven't even published my first article with FF Intervention, so those should be coming in the next month or so. And Adam, thank you for joining. Had a great time with you today, honestly. Great to get your insights.
Dude, yeah, 100%. I love having Adam on. He's like one of my favorite people to actually talk with. Damn it, I still couldn't get it. All right. I tried. You guys can go check us out over there at FF_intervention. I'm sorry, join our circle _intervention and on fantasyintervention.com. You guys can find my content over there, FF_intervention on Twitter. Big shout out to Fantasy Football Discussion on Facebook. You guys rock. Keep those questions coming. We thrive off of your need to get answers. Yeah, just keep soaking up those answers from us, please. No, and make sure you guys go check us out on YouTube, youtube.com/fantasyintervention. Thank you guys for listening, and thank you all for letting us intervene with your fantasy football life. We're out.